Today is August 6th, 2006. I am Sarah Lockard. It is a pleasure to conduct this interview for the Dakota Memories Oral History Project in Pahl, North Dakota. Can you state your full name, including your maiden name?
Norma Darlene Pahl Rost.
And when and where were you born?
I was born January 14th, 1936, on a farm at Forbes, North Dakota.
Do you remember your birth? Or did you hear, not do you remember it, did you hear any stories about your birth?
Not about my birth, but 1936 was one of the coldest winters in North Dakota. So I hear a lot about that.
Did your mother have you at home then? Or did she have to travel to the hospital?
No, I was born at home.
What is your earliest memory?
I suppose just before I started school, as kids playing, and I guess that would be my earliest remember. Probably when my youngest sister was born when I was 6 years old. Going to school that morning, all excited because we had a new baby sister, and coming to school, and the teacher didn't believe it because nobody knew, I suppose, that my mother was pregnant. And so finally he asked the older sisters and brothers, if it was true that we really had a new baby at our house. And it was a snowstorm when she was born. My dad went over with a team of horses and got the midwife to come and help with the birth. And so that's one of the earliest memories of the family going on, besides what us kids would be playing as little kids. So.
And you guys were all excited for the new baby? Did that last, or?
Yeah, it kind of lasted. I had an older sister at home at the time, and it just so happened at that time my mother had an aunt that was sick, and so she went up there to take care of that aunt. So my older sister was taking care of the baby and the rest of us, and so we were entertained with the baby a lot. So she was a spoiled baby.
Did she end up being the baby?
Yes.
Staying the youngest?
Yes.
What was it like growing up on the plains?
I guess one thing I think about when I think about kids growing up today and us growing up, we learned to be self-entertaining. We'd be out, we'd have apple boxes and jar lids and whatever for our dishes and our cookware and our cupboards, outdoors or indoors. We didn't have bought and paper dolls, but my sisters, especially my two younger sisters and I, we would cut the dolls out of the catalogs and make our own paper dolls. And we had lots of clothes for them. And we played a lot outside, pretending, of course, being farmers and playing in the dirt and so forth. Of course, any time you were old enough, you had your chores to do, which took a part of the time of the day. I think my thing I hated worst, most anything doing in the farm, was hoeing the garden. That was one job I did not like. Never enjoyed hoeing the garden. But we had to take care of the chickens and the geese and the ducks, and of course milk the cows and feed the calves and turn the old separator by hand, because you had to do it at the right speed, because if you didn't do it at the right speed, you either had too thick a cream or too thin a cream. So you had to just do it right, and you had to learn that. So we just, besides entertaining ourselves, you were busy. You didn't sit down and say, there's nothing to do.
What would you do? What kind of games would you play at school then?
We would play anti-over, which is divide the group in halves. And of course we had barns at the school that weren't too high, so one group would go one side of the barn and the other group on the other side of the barn. You throw the ball over it, catch it, and then run to the other side, and anybody you touched with the ball on the other side had to stay on your side and see who could have the would win the game by having everybody on your side. Pump Pump Pull Away, Fox and Goose during the winter months. Of course, you played softball. Uh, we did what we in the barn. We just called it wolf, but it was kind of a tag game that we would play. You'd hit one of it with the wolf, and of course, if you'd go from place to place and you tagged them, they had to come with you. And so that was one of entertainment. We had swings in the barn, and we had one where you just had one rope and you had a board and you sat on. The other person would take this and swing it, and you go around and around and around. See how high you could go and how sick you could get. If you during the winter months, you went ice skating on the ice, any lake that was close to the school. You ice skate. You did sledding. So there was lots of things to do.
It definitely was. Let's talk about your family a little bit. Can you tell me about your grandparents on your mother's side?
I didn't know either one of my grandparents. When I don't even know if I was born yet, when my dad's family moved out to California. My grandpa on my mother's side passed away when I was 3 years old, and then grandma went out to California too. So I never knew any of my grandparents.
Why did they go to California? Do you know?
Some of the aunt and uncles had moved out, and I guess it sounded so good they went there too. So.
Well, let's go to your parents. Can you tell me about your father? What was his name? When was he born?
His name was Wilhelm Pahl. He was born December 18th, 1905 in Russia. He come over to the States when he was, I believe, 5 years old. Um, his grandparents, his parents, and come over with all at one time. Some uncles of my dad's come over later on. They settled first southwest of town and tried farming, and I guess that was successful. And my grandfather was a professional shoemaker in the old country. And so when they moved to Forbes, North Dakota, he had a harness and shoe shop down there until it burned down, and then they went to California after that. My dad, as a young man, I know that him and a brother owned a thrash machine, so they were, on a thrashers, went around thrashing for people. He run the steam engine, which was one of his pride and joys, because he talked about that a lot. And my mom her folks come over from the old country, and they stayed a winter in South Dakota with some relatives, and then they come up to this part where they homesteaded the place where I was born, which my grandfather homesteaded and is still in the family. There's nobody living on the farm anymore, but it's still owned by the family, by one of the family members. Mom got married when she was 19, and other than that, she just was at home. She never worked out anywhere or anything like that. She always made the remark, I'm surprised when my dad showed interest in her. I guess I guess they kind of thought different classes of people, so she was really surprised when he showed interest in her. And they were married at Allendale, North Dakota by a judge, and stipulation was Dad had to own 2 horses and something else before he would get married, and he did. And they had, for the witnesses, they just had some people at the courthouse. They didn't even have any friends or anything with them, just some people from the courthouse who were the witnesses when they got married. So.
Can you explain a little more about the different classes that she was surprised he'd shown interest?
I guess they kind of, I think the Pauls were kind of, had, more money and so on, probably than the Baders did. So, and my mother had a child out of wedlock. it was a rape case. And so even for someone to show interest in a woman that had a child out of wedlock was, not that popular at that time. So.
Okay. What can you share some stories that you have about your relationship with your dad and with your mom?
My dad was strict while we were growing up, but he was also, and when the work was done in the evening after supper, he'd sit and he'd play games with us. Us girls would sit on his lap. We'd put curlers in his hair or comb his hair or whatever, and he'd just sit so calmly and so quietly and not move. Mother would even scold us for sitting in there, and he just calmly did. My mother was a very religious person, and she thought games was wasting time, sitting and playing games. She never sat and played games with us like Dad did. But she would be busy in the evening. She would always be mending or sewing or quilting or always something with her hands. She was always busy with her hands. Uh, if we weren't playing games in the evening as we got older, we spent a lot of time at the piano. I played the piano. We spent time singing. My brother played the guitar and saxophone. So we spent a lot of evenings with music, and Mom and Dad would join us in this with the singing. Especially Dad enjoyed it. And he was strict with us, but anytime he needed help and stood up, he stood up for us. So.
What kind of songs would you sing? Were they church songs? Were they fun songs?
Church hymnals and country western. So.
Do you remember any of them?
Oh, let's see. We had the Yellow Rose of Texas. We would do. I can't think of any off. They're the older old westerns. And the old west church, like in the garden and the old hymnals. We would do those.
And how did you all learn? You played the piano. Your brother played the sax, guitar. How did you guys learn to play the instruments?
I took a few piano lessons, but not that many. And my brother taught himself, and I did two of the piano, and then of course I can play some by ear, so that come naturally that way. So.
And how many brothers and sisters do you have?
There is 6 boys and 6 girls in the family.
Can you list them off? As close to order as maybe you remember?
There was Harold, Elsie, Otto, Lenora, Walter, Lloyd, Lauren, Beulah, myself, Alvin, Pearl, and Dorothy. So.
Did the older brothers and sisters kind of become parents to the younger ones?
No. When this was during the drought years, when my older sisters and brothers, and of course, as soon as they were capable, they were hired out. In fact, I can remember seeing my oldest brother for the first time, and I was a first grader in high school, and he come home from the service, and that's the first time I can remember seeing my oldest brother. My oldest sister, I can remember her because she worked out by some people at Allendale, and she'd come home once in a while on Saturdays. So her, my other oldest brother, in fact, my other 2 oldest brothers, I really don't remember at home either. My other sister, I remember, and she was kind of a mother to us, that I mentioned earlier. She took care of the baby, and she stayed home until she was, I think, in her early 20s, simply because Mother needed the help. But the older ones, during the drought years, when they were old enough, they worked out. So I didn't know my older sisters and brothers until they retired, and they would come and spend a week or 10 days at your home, So that's the way we got to know each other.
Much later in life.
Yes.
Wow. So was there any sort of competition or different relationships between all of you then?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. the my brother, that's one of my brothers, a year younger than I am, so we did a lot of things together. One brother that's older than us, he liked horses. I liked horses. We spent a lot of time together. He would train horses to do tricks, and so we would be there. I'd be there helping him. He was also the one that played guitar, and he's the one he loved to try things and manage them. He does. In fact, he did some rope tricks, and he still does them at demonstrations at some schools in Minnesota today. And he would. We went to a circus. I'll never forget. We went to the circus, and you see these people cracking the whips, and cutting off papers. Well, he started out by sticking a straw into the crack in a barn door and snapping it. So he said, Norma, if you hold that, and if I hit your hand, I'll give you a quarter. Well, Norma was brave enough and held it, but I never got hit. So the things that you did, the things you did with brothers and sisters that had the same interest as you did, you got closer to than those that had different interests. So that way it made a difference.
If you guys were being a little mischievous, or your brothers were, or whatever, who would end up disciplining you guys?
We were brought up strict, and in fact I can only remember my dad spanking us once, and my mother I really can't remember, but we knew when mother would say, otherwise it was Norma, but if mother would use our middle names and say, Norma darling, we knew it was time to quit. So just by their actions, or like I say, with their tone of their voice, we knew when we had gone far enough. So.
Do you have any other special memories of your brothers and sisters, of when you guys would play on the farm, or adventurous things you did?
Oh yeah, we would. My two younger sisters and I, we played paper dolls a lot together, and I think I was 13 years old and I still play paper dolls because it was fun, because we did a lot of imaginary things with the dolls. We would travel and so forth. And with the music, like I say, with playing that, that was special. And then sitting at the tables and playing the games like we did, you'd have that closeness, together with them. And then just doing the chores together, when we would be out walking, getting the cows, for instance, we'd be singing together, or doing things that we shouldn't have been doing. For instance, my dad would not allow us to tie our blouses up, how the style was then, and have that naked tie. Well, my dad would not allow it, but when we were off, of course, we'd tie our blouses up until we got close to the home again, then we would untie them. And different things that you do together that are really good memories.
Would you play more with your family, or would you also have neighborhood kids come by?
No, we had neighborhood kids. Sunday afternoons, a lot of times they would walk to, come walk, because we didn't dare drive at those days. But we would walk to our neighbors, or the kids would walk to our places on Sunday afternoons, and we would spend the afternoons together.
What kind of games would you play as a group?
Oh, about like we did at school, pump pump pull away, or softball, or whatever. And then in the teen years, I wasn't in my teens yet, but my brothers were. They had a softball team, and they'd get together in the afternoons. There'd probably be 20, 25 teenage boys playing, and of course then the younger sisters and brothers would go along and just tear around the afternoon and Sunday afternoons together. There'd probably be 30, 40 of us there. They'd be playing softball, and we'd be doing whatever.
Everything else.
Yeah.
It's fun. With school, Did you have any ideas when you first started school what you wanted to do when you grew up?
Uh, if I would have continued my education, it would have been going into teaching. I've always enjoyed teaching. Uh, when I went to grade school, when I was in the 8th grade, there was 18 students in the school. So a lot of times us 8th graders would help the younger ones, or, you know, okay, it was reading class time, the teacher was busy, so we would have them read or whatever. And if I would have chosen a career, it would have been teaching.
Did you grow up speaking German as well at home, or did you speak English?
I don't remember German being our prominent language at home. Um, I don't recall it, but my older sisters and brothers said that when World War II started, um, I guess the parents were kind of afraid, or the older people kind of afraid to let people know that, you knew German or were of German descent. So English took over the home. And we always boarded teachers at our house. And a lot of the teachers couldn't talk German. So English was the language that I grew up with. Um, I knew some German, but the German I know now I mostly learned after I was married.
So it happens when you marry a German. In your school, was it all Germans, or were they of different ethnicities?
um, there were some, now I don't know what nationality they were, but uh, they weren't German, but it didn't make any difference.
Your teacher didn't treat anybody differently?
No. And this is one of my girlfriends says, I don't know how you kids ever learned anything in school. I started school during World War II. Um, all the young men were in the service, and we had very poor teachers. In fact, if you wouldn't believe some of the stories I could tell you that we did. Um, there was some, that one year we had one teacher. I'll give an example. We had one young man teacher. He was fired at Christmas time, but all he did was flirt with the 8th grade girls in school. We had no classes. We had nothing. Then they hired a girl that had not even finished her sophomore year in high school, and she was interested in the 8th grade boy. So we did not have any classes or anything either. I mean, we just spent 9 months or 8 months at that time in school without being educated those 8 months. That's for about 3 years. That's the way the teaching situation was because of teachers not being available because of the war. So it was when I was in the 5th grade, I believe it was. We had a young girl come out of just from high school, and she come and taught school, and she couldn't believe that we didn't have education, and she started us all out in 1st grade with phonics and everything, and we can thank her for the education we got then, that year to get us started.
Start over.
Yeah.
Wow. Did the war have any other impact on your life at home?
Oh, yes. I was 5, 6 years old when it started, and of course, planes at that time, weren't common. And of course, all we heard about planes was bombing. So if you woke up during the night, you'd hear an airplane. I was scared to death because all I heard about planes was bombing. Um, my dad, at 6 o'clock in the evening, Gabriel Heater was on. And that was news time. And you did not talk during that time because my dad was listening to the evening world news. And of course, it was like news today. You'd hear the number of soldiers that were killed and all this. Well, that's the only thing we heard of the war. You didn't have television or things, like now. So the only thing we heard was the bad things, and so we really were. You were scared of things. And I remember the blackouts. On certain nights, they would call it a blackout, and you didn't dare have any lights on any place in your home for so many hours because I suppose it was a national defense thing or something. I didn't fully understand, but I can remember it because at that time all the lights had to be out, and it just wasn't a very relaxing time. I guess I was young, but I can remember that.
During the blackouts, would you just sit? Did you guys still
We
play?
No, we would usually end up being in bed. So
Regardless of what time it was at?
yeah, yeah. Well, it was usually at night, after dark. So yeah, we'd be in bed at the time.
Did your mom have any problems with rationing and getting things she needed?
Oh yes, I still have some rationing books today on my name that they saved. Um, I think the worst thing that most homes probably around here noticed was the sugar, because you could only have so much sugar per person in your family. Uh, Coffee was one, sugar and coffee. Now I don't remember if there were any other food items or not that you had to have stamps for, but I remember those two you did. Of course, the tires. My dad, would talk about tires. Tires were very hard to get at the time. Any farm equipment that you wanted, you'd have to probably wait a year or two when you ordered it to get it because war was priority. Things went for the war. Um, Shoes, I remember you were very careful with your shoes because they weren't an item that was too easy to get either.
So would you wear shoes while you were out in the field or gardening?
Yeah, we did.
Just had good ones that you saved for church?
Yes, you usually had sometimes you had to wear your everyday shoes to church, but as a rule, that I can remember, we were fortunate enough to have a pair that we'd have for dress and a pair for home and school and so forth. And then usually they were the kind when your everyday shoes were worn out, your dress shoes would be taken over, and uh, so it wasn't that you wore a fancy dress shoe.
Mm-hmm. Were you able to order a lot of clothes, or did your mom have to make the clothes?
We were fortunate. My mother was a very good seamstress. Um, us girls would look at a dress in a catalog and would say we'd like a dress like that. Mother would take another dress for the size, and don't ask me how she did it, but she'd sew us a dress like that one in the catalog. So we were very fortunate that way. The only thing like the underclothes and coats, but like the slips and dresses and that, my mother sewed all. In fact, she even sewed some of the boys' shirts. And like I say, we were fortunate because she was a very good seamstress.
Was she able to patch clothes?
Oh yes.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yes. She patched a lot of clothes. Like I said, she'd sit in the evening and I can still see her. She'd have her, especially in the socks, she would do what they call darning socks, and they had this special yarn, and they would go like in a weave it this way and then weave it this way with this yarn, and she'd spend the evening mending socks.
Wow. Was your mom also a good cook?
Yes, she was a good cook. Um, we didn't have very many German dishes because my dad didn't like dough dishes. So we didn't grow up with the dough dishes. But my mother was very good cook, and she went someplace and had a new dish. She wanted the recipe, and she was excited about trying it. So she was that way she was. And when lettuce and things come out in the market that you could buy here, she was right in there and using it and buying it. So
Did she ever make anything that you didn't care for?
yes, side pork.
Side pork?
Side pork and mumlik.
What are those?
um, Side pork is what they would use for bacon today, but they didn't smoke it. They just salted it down in the barrels, and then as my mother would need it, they'd get a piece out and they would thaw it out, and she'd cut it and fry it. And that wasn't my cup of tea. And then mumlik was, they'd take cornmeal and I don't know, they'd cook it up into some kind of a mush. And then we'd have it for supper. You were supposed to put the fat from the side pork over this. And like I say, that I didn't like. And then in the morning, what was left from mumlik, she would fry and we'd put syrup over it. Um, I'm not fond. I wasn't very fond of the dough dishes, and she usually fixed them if Dad wouldn't be home. She'd probably fix the dough dish, but I didn't care for them too much either. Other than that, well, what they called head cheese, I didn't care for, because and one experience I had a pet calf in the barn. I come home the evening from school, and first thing I did was go to the barn and played with this calf. And one day I come home, this calf was gone. They had butchered it, and I didn't touch beef for many years. So.
What did you like that she made? What was a favorite recipe you liked?
I think one of my favorite things was fried chicken and mashed potatoes. And then what we called kiekler or doughboys, that was one. And then the kiekler and doughboys, we'd have sauerkraut and hamburger mixed, and then mashed potatoes, and then the doughboys or kiekler. That was one of my favorites.
You said that your mom was fairly religious. What religion was she?
Evangelical, the Evangelical Church.
Okay. Would you guys go to church every Sunday?
Oh yes, we went to church every Sunday. And there was always prayer before meals. There was always a family devotion after breakfast. And when our country church closed and we come into town, we usually went to church on Sunday evenings too. And so that way, yeah.
In the church, in a country church, or even when you came into town, did people have to sit in a certain way, or did the families sit together?
Usually the women sat on one side, the men sat on the other side, and then the girls would sit further up front than the ladies, and the young fellas when the men sat on that side, they'd sit further up front. But usually the men and women were separated.
Was there ever any problems with all the kids sitting by each other without parents?
I don't think so. I think if there probably was, when you got home, you knew about it.
You got told.
Yeah.
With religion, did you guys have a separate catechism school or a Sunday school or any kind of church school you went to?
There was Sunday school, and then when you were about in the 8th grade, then you would go to catechism school, and that probably you would go every Saturday for the winter months, starting early in the fall through the school year, and then in the spring when they had Bible school, the catechism class would have catechism class during the Bible school, and that was usually our catechism then. So.
Was it important to your family when you made your first communion and got confirmed?
It was important, but they didn't make a big deal of it like they do today. There wasn't like a big extra special dinner or something, but you knew it was an important day.
Were you able to talk with your parents or your pastor about religion, or was religion more just sharing what was in the Bible?
Usually Sunday noon at the table, if there was anything about the sermon or the Sunday school that you wondered about or something, that was usually our Sunday dinner discussion.
to actually ask some questions.
Mm-hmm.
When you remember going to church, was it in English or was it still in German?
The country church was in German. Uh, and our family devotion was in German. And I often wondered why, because us kids couldn't understand German. But later, when we come to town, then it was English. So.
Did your parents like it in English, or did they prefer the German?
Uh, I think they didn't have any problem with it. Mother taught Sunday school, and in fact, in the country church, she taught the young people, and that was in English. So, and now some of the older sisters and brothers were confirmed in German. I was confirmed in English. So.
With religion, what was Christmas like for your family?
We always got a Christmas gift. Some years we had a Christmas tree. Some years we didn't. Um, I think the most important thing was put the emphasis on the Christ of birth, the Christ's birth, and I don't really know why, but we always celebrated the 26th too. It was always kept sacred, the 25th and the 26th. That we always had those 2 days for Christmas, but the main purpose of Christmas was the discussion of Christ's birth and the meaning of Christmas rather than the gifting side of it. We never, when we were home, we were never given money like to buy gifts for the parents or the sisters and brothers, but us kids always got a gift from mom and dad for Christmas.
What were some of the gifts that you would have gotten?
Oh, like when we were younger, we probably would have got a doll, book. When you got older, it was clothing. Sweater you probably wanted, or something like that. Because I remember one Christmas, I don't know, Mother had sewed me a black skirt or red plaid skirt, and I said, "Oh, I'd like a red sweater to that." And then that evening before we went to the church program to give me my Christmas gift early, and here it was the red sweater I wanted for my skirt. So.
A brand new outfit. So you guys would go to midnight mass for Christmas, or would you go to a day mass?
We would go. They usually had what we call the Christmas program in the evening at about 7:30, and the children would perform, and that would be our Christmas Eve.
What was Easter like for your family?
Uh, we would dye eggs, have a special dinner on Easter. Of course, after the older ones, probably that were gone, would come home for the holiday. Um, but the emphasis there also was that Christ had risen more so than and we would always have new outfits for Easter. Mother always got us something sewed new for Easter for the spring. So.
You said that you'd have a special meal. What would she make?
I don't think there was any special menu, whatever it happened to be that Sunday. It isn't that we had to have ham because it was Easter or anything. It's just whatever the menu was that day.
Would she add in a dessert or?
Oh yeah, we always have dessert, probably a little extra salad or something extra. That being it was Easter, and my mother would always bake what she called hot cross buns. She'd take bread dough and kind of make them look like, time it a knot so they look like a little bird. And then she'd also take some and just make kind of a bun, but she'd make a cross on top of the bun that when you baked it, you could see the cross imprint. And of course, then that little bird to represent spring. So.
That would have been nice, having the nice bread smell, baking. Did you guys celebrate each birthday?
Yeah, we usually had a birthday cake. If there was nothing out, we would have a birthday cake. So.
What about the 4th of July?
Um, We would, if there was celebration in town or what we call Whitestone Battlefield here, uh, we they would take the family and go.
What kind of celebration would happen in town?
Oh, they'd probably have a parade, uh, probably a merry-go-round, a small fair thing, and then you get to, just all the people getting together with everybody. And in the evening, there usually was some doings of some sort, but um, my mother and dad didn't go to dances or anything like that, so we never did. We didn't attend those things.
When you would come to town, was there a difference between townspeople and farm people?
Uh, when we did come to town, people, people weren't around like now. You probably come in and got your groceries or repairs or whatever, and you went right home. You'd never think of stopping by going to a cafe and having a cup of coffee or that kind of thing. But when I started high school, yeah, you could tell there was kind of a split between the country kids and the city kids, probably for the first semester until you got to know each other, and then you didn't notice it, but you did at first. So.
Did was there anybody that thought they were better than another group, or did both just think they were better than the other?
Oh, there's individuals, of course, that thought they were better than others, but as a whole, no, I don't think they did.
So you came into high school and went to high school in Calm.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have to board, or did you just come in and out every day?
No, we boarded in town. They would bring us in Sunday evenings and usually get us Friday evenings after school. Come in Sunday evenings and go home Friday evenings after school.
How was the transition between country school and high school?
Oh, it was a scary feeling the first the first week because you were used to one room. Well, here you come into, of course they weren't a big school, but still, it was quite a transition.
And didn't you go to school for more months?
Yeah, you went to school 9 months. We were out in the country school. We went 8 months.
What would you guys do in high school if you had some free time to hang out with friends?
Walk the streets. um, there really wasn't that much to do. Usually after school you'd run uptown and you'd have a Coke or a cone of ice cream and go do your homework. And of course, by that time it was lunchtime and or supper time. And after supper, maybe once in a while you'd go up to town, but otherwise you just stayed in the room. Maybe a friend come over, you'd go to a friend's room and you'd spend the evening in the room, just visiting and so forth, until you had old enough to date and have boyfriends.
What would you guys do for a date?
Oh, you go to a movie. Um, Otherwise, you just drive the streets and that would be it. Because there wasn't much to do, and you didn't think about driving to Jamestown for anything in those days.
This would have been too far to go.
Yeah.
Did the high school have any dances?
Probably 2 or 3 a year. There would be, of course, there would be basketball games 1 or 2 nights a week. And then in the church, you'd have choir one night. You'd have probably youth fellowship 1 or 2 nights a month that you'd go to. And then at high school, you'd have what we call KGA, which is Girls Athletic Association. You'd have 1 or 2 meetings a month there. So there was always something.
Something to keep you busy?
Yeah.
Did you guys have to work at all to help pay for your board in town?
No, we didn't. No, the folks took care of that.